Spiritual disciplines, and we're going to continue talking about service, and we're going to kind of start moving into stewardship. But we've been talking about it over the last couple of weeks, what it is and things like that. But we'll go ahead and start off with a word of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for this day, Lord, and thank you for this time that we can get together and just hear from you, Lord. And I pray that you forgive us where we fail you and just lead us and guide us in those struggles, Lord, and just bring us closer to you and continue teaching us. Unlifted, because only through Christ is it taken away. Yes, to this day, whenever Moses is read, a veil lies over their hearts. But for when one turns to the Lord, the veil is removed. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of God, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. Okay, we've been talking about service and where we can fit or finding our place and things like that. So let's kind of review about service. What is service? Where can someone serve when it comes to the discipline? Where are some places that we can serve?
Church, home, work.
Mm-hmm. How can we kind of find or know where we are supposed to serve? Is it automatic?
There'll be a need, generally.
Mm-hmm. Is it something we might have to try and fail at?
Yes.
Yes. So it's not always just an automatic thing, and it might be a path. Serve here, serve there, serve this other place. And even then, it may modulate within those areas, right? It's like my mom and dad served in the nursery for years. Everybody knew Miss Carol and Mr. Dennis. And my mom still serves in the nursery. Everybody and anybody that has gone through Swartz pretty much knows Miss Carol. She always sits in the same place that's close to the door, so she doesn't have to walk very far. Or she's in the nursery. That's one of the two places she has been for years. But when it comes to people being like voluntold to be someplace or participate or serve, how might that affect the church?
Like when you're forced to do it,
Sort of.
I think we kind of hit on it last week, that if you put a person in a place of service and they're not to be in that place, then you're taking that position away from someone that could be called for that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's bad on two counts. You got somebody that's possibly ineffective and not suited for that role, and you have someone that is suited for that role that doesn't get the opportunity.
It's kind of like someone volunteering for a place, same lines of not being called there. Someone not wanting to be over here serving, so they choose to serve over here.
Sometimes it's hard to tell people that maybe this is not your gift, maybe this is, like, if you're told that, hey, maybe you just need to bring plates and plasticware to the picnic, maybe you need to understand that nobody likes to eat potato salad and you shouldn't make it.
Yeah. When it comes to it's like the statement we kind of touched on last week. Service that costs nothing accomplishes nothing. How does that come into play?
Service that costs nothing, accomplishes nothing?
Depends on, like anything else, what do you mean by the phrase? 'Cause there's context that I could say, well, that makes perfect sense, and other contexts, I don't know,
You know, it costs me nothing every day when my class is in to say, I love you, see you tomorrow, and don't do anything stupid. But I think it accomplishes something because, you know, those kids know that someone at least cares for them.
Yeah,
But in another sense, it does cost you something, because it costs intentionality, time, a little bit of effort, a little bit of care. You had to care to even come up with that. So that's why it costs you nothing. Some of that's in the eye of the beholder. Does it really, because there's some things that are very costly there. I look at something somebody does and go, that's really hard to do. But for them, it's just so easy, effortless, they enjoy it. They would feel like it doesn't cost them anything. But if I tried to do that, that would be very different. So,
and that idea is like special education versus regular education. I look at regular ed teachers and go, man, it takes somebody special to be in that classroom. But yet people always say, self-contained, you're a special person. I'm like, no, I'm not really. I'm just in the classroom. Yeah, there's behaviors we work on and stuff like this, but it's nothing really that special about it.
well, that's
Because,
what I did. Going back to your question a minute ago on being told to serve somewhere. I think that it's appropriate and good and right that everybody in the church needs to be told they need to serve.
mm-hmm,
However, that area might be different. I think that it's okay to, like we were talking about, try something, do something, fill a need, and then at some point move to something else. But what's not okay is to not serve.
right,
What is okay is figuring out in where to serve.
mm-hmm,
But just to say, well, I'm not fit for this one, so I'm not gonna serve in anything, that's
Right.
not acceptable. But to your point that, you know, going to the bitches, to be told you must serve in this thing, do this, I think that's
right.
probably the problem.
But it's like, oh, you,
I was gonna say, sometimes it's useful for somebody to say something to somebody, like, I recognize this gift in you, you're really talented
Right.
in this. Sometimes they just need some encouragement to know, like, oh, somebody, Anna? Like, and then they start enjoying it or whatever.
Mhm.
So sometimes it's nice to be told, I noticed this quality in you or whatever.
right. And sometimes the pastor or elders know of a need that nobody else really knows, but they see somebody that can actually, hey, we can do this with this person. And they can kind of suggest, hey, would you do this for a little bit? It's like, okay. Okay, now that leads into the next question. How does the lack of involvement affect how we participate in service? And how does that lack affect those around us?
It's the opposite peer pressure. If you see people not helping, then you're like, I don't do it.
How does that lack affect those around us?
Things don't get done.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes it's the same people doing it every single time.
Yeah, that thing.
I get it, because nobody else will step up, so it's the same people doing the stuff, and that can be hard too.
It's kind of like through service, we grow. Now, if it's painful, that could be a painful growth, but we know, okay, this is not exactly where I'm supposed to be, but there is still growth there. We're called to serve. And it may take us several different places or positions and ideas to find where we fit in, but if nobody actually steps up, is anybody really growing? So in a lot of churches, we have people that are, their salvation is based on their place on Sunday morning. They like, as long as they're in church on Sunday morning, they're good. But they're not really growing. When we're serving, we're trying, we're searching, there is some growth there. And sometimes, like teaching Sunday school, there's study involved. There's thought involved, and through that, there is some growth. Some are growing more than others, but there is study involved. And if we're actually looking and searching for where we're supposed to be, there is growth there, right? Good.
You said a minute ago, without a cost, there's not a what?
It's one of the quotes that's in the book. It says, "Service that costs nothing accomplishes nothing."
Yeah. Well, service has a time cost. If you strip away everything else, service has a time cost. You're either going to be doing something you want to do, and I really don't want to couch it in, I want to do it, I don't want to do it, I'm good at it, I'm not good at it. Because God puts us in places of service in areas that we're not necessarily the best at sometimes. He does that intentionally. But every service has a time cost. I have to devote time to that service. So if I'm not devoting time to that service, it's probably not going to accomplish much. If I'm not devoting time to it, I'm probably not going to grow much in it.
Right.
If I'm not devoting the time, if I'm not paying the time cost, then it's probably not really going to do much or go much anywhere. And kind of like cheap toys made in China. You know, they look good on the outside, but they break very quickly, they don't work very well, if at all, and it really puts a bad taste in people's mouth, you know, when their toy doesn't work, whatever that might be. And instead of actually investing in the real deal, you buy a cheap knockoff, and then the real deal takes a bad rap because everybody's got the knockoff, because nobody wants to pay the cost, and we're just trying to look like we're doing something when in actuality we're not.
Right.
And so I would agree with that statement in terms on almost unilaterally across every circumstance that there is, if nothing else, a time cost that has to be paid if that service is really going to be done well.
Some years ago, the SBC lowered the standards for missionaries to get more people in there. And I think with any time you're lowering the standards to do something, you're going to get a lower value or lower, you're not going to accomplish as much. And I compared it to if you lowered the standards for someone to be a plumber, you know, pretty soon you're going to have these unqualified plumbers going out there trying to fix problems people have, and they're either going to not fix the problem or make the problem worse. And when people are standing in a field like that, because the plumber was bad, they're just going to think the whole plumbing racket is bad. And I'm afraid that they won't even call it qualified plumber then, because that's tainted them on the idea of plumbers being able to fix their problem. And the same thing with missionaries going out. If you have someone going out who's unqualified or not even saved, and they're trying to do something, they may chalk that up to all people witnessing about Christ. All, you know, religion is false. And so they just discount every religion and every person who's trying to share their faith with them in the future because of one person has done so poorly.
There's one of the examples is like being a Sunday school teacher. I've come across Sunday school teachers that study a lot, and I've come across Sunday school teachers that read straight from scripted material. It's like the more you prepare for it, the more you grow, and the more you can help others grow. If you don't spend the time, and you don't spend that time in study and prayer, it's not going to accomplish as much as if you were to spend the time in prayer and study. Now, the next set of verses is 1 Peter 4, 7 through 11. It says, "The end of all things is at hand. Therefore, be self-controlled and sober-minded for the sake of your prayers. Above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling, as each has received a gift. Use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. Whoever speaks, as one who speaks oracles of God. Whoever serves, as one who serves by the strength of God that supplies, in order that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. To him belong the glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen." Through our service, what is the ultimate goal? To glorify God. Through our stewardship, what is the goal? To glorify God. If we don't serve, or we're not good stewards, how does that look on the glory of God? It's not real positive.
You generally can't find it.
Mm-hmm.
You find a lot of glory in a lot of other things, but God's glory is not there.
So how we spend our time through service or stewardship, how we spend that time should be like in the forefront of our minds when we're thinking about, when we're planning on doing, whenever we're thinking about serving, or whenever we're getting ready for that serving. It doesn't really matter, nothing else matters but the glory of God. If other people are watching us and they see us in lack of prep or the lack of service or just half-hearted service, what kind of image are they getting? Because people watch us, even people we don't know. People watch us in our daily lives. If we're not focused on the glory of God, it's going to reflect and they're going to see it. And that's this, at this point, it's like service and stewardship, how we spend our time go hand in hand. Even though we may not know where we're supposed to be or what we're supposed to do, searching, because ultimately we want to bring glory to God, right? And that's how we spend our time shows what's important to us. In the Jonathan Edwards sermon is, I always call it redeeming the time, but it's the preciousness of time. But we'll get to that. And what's important to us is going to show, right? And it's like we talked about the eyes and the feet and the body of Christ a couple of weeks ago. But one of the things that makes me think is if the eye tries to be a foot on the beach, is it going to be very effective? No, there's going to be a lot of irritation. And what about a foot trying to be a hand? And the foot tries to pat somebody on the back. There's going to be some mixed signals there, right? Jonathan Edwards, using our time shows the pride of the world or the glory of God. And that quote can kind of apply to service and stewardship or the lack of. Jonathan Edwards uses these verses, Ephesians 5, 6 through 18. It says, "Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore do not become partners with them. For at one time you were darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light, for the fruit of the light is found in all that is good and right and true. And try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord. Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of the things that they do in secret. But when anything is exposed by the light, it becomes visible. For anything that becomes visible is light. Therefore it says, 'Awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you.' Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of time, because the days are evil. Therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. And do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit." And this, in these verses, even though this was long ago, how much does it still apply to today? For the days are evil. There's, everywhere we look, any channel we turn it on, any commercial that comes up almost, we can see where society has taken us. But Jonathan Edwards says, the text commands us to set a high value on our opportunities in the time is precious for the following reasons. Our eternity will be blissful or miserable depending on whether we used our time on earth wisely. The things that we serve in or how we use our time are precious in relation to the importance or the degree in which they concern our welfare. Men and women set the highest value on the things which they feel primarily affects them. Thus, the time is very precious because our eternal destiny depends on it. He goes on to say that time has been spent, it can never be retrieved. No amount of money or effort can recover it. He compares it to an hourglass. When the sand in our glass is moved, it's gone. If something is scarce, it becomes even more precious. The more scarce it is, the more precious it becomes. How we spend our time is very important. Because as we grow, the less time we have, the more precious it becomes. And this whole sermon is like step on my feet kind of thing in how we spend our time. How we spend our time shows what we think is important. Do we think service is important? Do we think sharing the gospel is important? Well, how does our time support what we think is important? That'll kick you in the shins pretty hard, because there are times that I look up and realize I'm just caught in whatever the flow is at school. Whatever angle the school is going and the things, the timing, the pep rallies, the schedules, it's easy to get overcome or just fall in line with everything that's going on. I have to always remember that there are, even though I'm on this schedule, there's important things that I need to be focused on. There are times that I can share what I can share, right? It's very easy to get caught up with that flow of things. Even as young kids and growing and looking to the future, it's real easy to become focused on that white picket fence and start our house and want to decorate it and stuff. When we focus on those things, what are we actually focused on? Ourselves and what we want. When it could be that God doesn't even want that for us. He wants this other direction. Don't think about a house in Monroe, but be open to a house someplace else. Not a brick house, it might be a hut someplace. Now, let me see if I did covered this question already. Over 25. How does precious and that idea, because eternity depends on how we use our time, work, how we use our time. Yeah, we've covered that. It's like how we use our time is very important. And it shows what is important to us. A lot of people look up and they've gotten older and they realize that they've been focused in this direction for so long that all this other stuff Hallmark movies. They've spent all this time in the job, but they realize their family has suffered. God has allotted us an amount of time. Not just us as an individual, but a set amount of time with those around us. Family, friends, and even the visitors that come in our door. We're only guaranteed a specific amount of time, and only God knows the timeline. Sometimes we can look up and we've lost somebody, either in death, or they've moved off, or they've found something else to do, or they go to another church, or they just visit one time. We can never go back and get that time. So using that time is very important while we have the visitor in the door, basically, and making them feel welcome. However we show them the gospel for that little bit of time, that may be the only time we get. And as to be good stewards, we should use that time properly and effectively and the best we can, right? In Romans chapter 12, 3 through 8, it says, "For as in one body we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function, so we, though many, are one body in Christ, and individual members one of another, having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us. Let us use them. If prophecy, in proportion to our faith; if service, in our serving; the one who teaches, in his teaching; the one who exhorts, in his exhortation; the one who contributes, in generosity; the one who leads, with zeal; and the one who does acts of mercy, with cheerfulness. No one is saved to sit and observe only. We are gifted and called to serve through what God has given us. Proper stewardship of our time will require us to use our spiritual gifts consistently. And to do that, we need to be sure of our gifts. When it comes to the verses and the service and all that, what are some of the ditches we may see? Like in the spiritual gifts we've listed over the past couple of weeks, what are some of the ditches that people fall into? It's like one of the administration. If anybody's done the spiritual gifts, they see administration. What are some ditches that we can fall into with service and stewardship?
I'm not gifted that way, so I don't have to do that.
Mhm.
I think maybe with like admin, sometimes you get a little power hungry.
Mm-hmm.
It could happen. I mean, I think I've seen it in some churches where, you have some people that just control too much.
I think sometimes a fear of failure means you'll take control of everything and not delegate. Like,
Mhm.
they're not doing, I mean, instead of just giving someone a task and then taking the extra time it would take for you to train them to do that task well, that may take 4 times as long as it would for me to just do it. So I'm saving my time by just doing it myself. And that's not the best use of your abilities.
Mm-hmm. Or only doing that. It's like,
Side of that is to outsource it.
mm-hmm.
Pay somebody, a third party to do it.
Yeah. It's like in Awana, it's whenever Swartz had the Awana program, and we had the same kind of person over it. And she also funded a lot of things because she had the means to be able to fund it. She bought a lot of extra things and stuff like that. But that's the only thing, that was her claim to fame kind of thing for a while. And then she got mad and left the church. What does she take with her? Most of what she funded. It's like, was your heart in it for the kids, or was it just because you wanted to be the leader?
So is it fair to ask this question? That we get used to things being done for us? That we're completely nose blind to the fact that there's only one or a few doing it?
It's like, as long as it gets done.
Well, we get used to it.
Yeah.
You know, we get used to things being read, things being done, things being taken care of, and we don't even really stop to think, well, okay, is this something that I could be doing? Something I wanna do, but it's already being done, so why do I even think about it?
I think that's what happened to me when I grew up, like, when I went from teenage years to actually seeing how a church ran. Like, as a child and a teenager, you go to church and everything's just there. You know, you go get your water, you go do this, you can whatever, there's always something to do. And then as you start to become an adult and you see that, wow, it actually takes stuff to run this, you know, people actually have to step up and fulfill these roles, or the group younger than us don't get the same amenities that we do.
Mm-hmm.
When you realize that, you know, it does take acts of service and people to actually make it a success.
You know, I've used this example with some folks before, you know, when we were talking about financial stewardship and giving. And I asked them this question: how many events did you attend early on in your tenure here where everything was taken care of? Dinner was taken care of, materials were taken care of, you were the beneficiary of those things. Who do you think paid for them? Church did. So now that you become a viable part of the church, you have to, you know, help contribute so that we can provide those things for people who are coming up after you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just one area. There's 1,000 areas where I think we all do get nose blind to it. You know, we're just so used to it that we just assume that it's always going to be taken care of. And the reality is that very diligent people step up to make sure that it does get done.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there are lots of opportunities for all of us to look around and go, hey, can I plug in here? You know, I have an interest in this area, and I have a gifting in this area, I have a talent in this area. I feel a certain degree that God has maybe called me to this area, and step up and maybe join the team that's already working to make sure those things are being done.
Mm-hmm.
Once something stops being done, that's when you recognize it's not being done. It's like, once you, as a young married, you walk by and say, somebody needs to wash the dishes. But there's only two of us, so you know, I'm somebody, so I guess I need to wash the dishes.
When Charles Spurgeon died, about 3 months after he died, they had a series of widows begin to show up at the church wanting to know where their pension was. And nobody knew about it. Well, in those 3 months before the widows started showing up, they went up onto the top of Charles Spurgeon's apartment building where they lived, where he and his wife lived. And there were chickens up there. And they knew that he kept chickens.
Mm-hmm.
But they quit keeping the chickens. As a matter of fact, Mrs. Spurgeon sold all the chickens and gave them away. You know, Charles is not here anymore, so I don't want them, don't want to keep them. You know, that was his pet project. So they got rid of all the chickens. And then the widows started showing up three months after the fact. And what Charles was doing is he was selling eggs to fund the widow's pension plan. And he took care of widows in the church, now albeit he didn't say anything. But, you know, there was a great need to take care of people within the church that when it wasn't being done anymore, oh my goodness, this is not being done anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, you can come through in a time of crisis and catastrophe. You can get up and running again, but, you know, I'm just thinking if we would just kind of watch and see what all is being done and just ask the question, can I plug in here? Then we don't have to face that catastrophe in that, moment when it stops being done. It just is, it's being done, but not being done by one or a few.
Well, and that's what I think it starts with, the phrase you used a second ago was nose blind. I think part of all this aspect with service and the rest of the spiritual gifts is a consistent prayer of asking God to open your eyes to things that need to be done, things that are being done. Even if it's not just opening your eyes, oh, this needs to be done, I'll do it, but just a recognition of, oh, that does get done by somebody, and a gratefulness that comes with just the recognition that it gets done. I was once listening to a conversation between two people, and going back to your point of ditch on both sides of the road, this guy was saying, don't worry about it, it'll take care of itself, it'll get done, it'll happen. And the other person in the conversation goes, no, it won't just happen. People will do it for you, and then you just think that it just happens, but it doesn't just happen, somebody does it. And they highlight the two ditches. There's the ditch that was always worried about it, always wanting to control it, always feeling like I have to own every detail. Okay, there's a ditch there, but the stuff must. And then there's the other side that there is some good in realizing that it is going to get taken care of. But you can be so detached from it that you're not even grateful or realizing that someone's doing that for you. And so I think just beginning with prayer of open my eyes so I can see what is being done, what's not being done, so that I can know where do I need to be filled in and what do I need to be grateful for. And Michelle was talking about the child, that just all the stuff is just there, and you don't think about that somebody had to do this. But there's a gratefulness that comes with awareness on all of those areas that we need to be praying for God to open our eyes to.
There was a video that reminds me of, it's like a young wife goes to her husband and she's all stressed. She's always busy, she's tired, and she's worn down. And she starts talking to her husband, and he's like, why are you worried about that? Why are you worried about the clothes? Watch this. And he takes the dirty clothes and he puts them on the washer. And he goes, see, watch. In the morning, they're going to be done. Well, it's just magically happened. Or the dishes being done. He's like, oh, watch. Just leave them on the table right here. They'll be gone in the morning. Somebody does that. It's not just magically done. The trash doesn't just magically disappear. There's somebody that takes it out. Nobody cares about the trash until it doesn't get taken out. And then all of a sudden it becomes a big deal.
Brother Ron Thomas, whenever you would ask him, how are you doing? He would respond, well, I'm Ducky. And to anybody that knew him, understands that he's not saying everything is good and glory. Ducky is, if you see a duck swimming along the top of the water, just gliding real easy. But as soon as you go into the water, you see him paddling and kicking as hard as he can just to make everything. You don't know how much work is going on underneath until the duck actually stops.
And he always said that. Okay, if we took a snapshot of our time, what would it show that we look forward to? A blissful or miserable eternity? What would our time show? Stewardship of our time and service should always reflect God's glory, and when it doesn't, it reflects a miserable eternity. And just because we come to church and we sit in the same pew every Sunday doesn't mean we understand what salvation means. Those people around us, if we don't ask questions and we don't go to the visitors and make them feel welcome, that may be the only time they see the gospel. It's talking about the follow-up and all that. If that's the only time we see them, we've got to have this other connection or this other contact to make sure they see salvation at least a little. Now, if that veil is over their eyes, that's something God does or doesn't do. And when I was listening to that passage this week, it was like Moses had that veil over his face so people wouldn't see that glow diminishing. And Brother Rusty has talked about that before, and I never realized where it was. I was like, where? I didn't ever know until this week when I listened to it. I'm like, that's where it comes from. And it's like whenever we have that encounter, salvation understanding, and we have that encounter with God, we have this excitement, we have this glow. And if we don't spend our time wisely, that glow can start to fade. If we don't use our time in service or our service properly, that glow can start to fade and that veil start to be put over our eyes. Paul talks about Israel and the Jews in that veil over their eyes just to kind of push him to the Gentiles and they could receive salvation through that time. But he talked about there'll be a time when the Jews' veil is removed. But you can also apply that to sin. If we're living our lives and there's sin in our lives, that sin kind of puts a veil over our eyes. And if we're not living a repentant life, the thicker and bigger that veil becomes. We need to be diligent in our service and our stewardship, because when we don't follow through with those things, that's sin. And it's as easy as not going to that visitor when we have a chance, not following up when we have a chance. We know we should. If we choose not to, that's sin. And we have a responsibility to those things. But that is basically it for today, and we'll go into stewardship some more next week. We'll go ahead and pray and take a break. Dear Heavenly Father, I pray that just thanking you for your word, Lord, and I pray that you'll just lead me and guide me closer to you and continue teaching us through these lessons, and bring it to our eyes and the forefronts, to our thoughts of serving you in every way we can, Lord. And I pray all this in Christ's holy name.